In the courtroom of Judge Frank Caprio, a woman showed up, and as soon as she arrived, she started to act disrespectfully towards him. She claimed that she would refuse to pay the fine. Do what you need. The judge said he would create a payment plan for her, making it easier for her to pay the fine, but the woman's attitude was quite rude, and she replied that, whatever, go ahead and do what you wish, I won't pay at all. Judge Frank Caprio, recognized worldwide for his empathy and kindness, encountered this woman in his courtroom for the first time. This court proceeding might not be published anywhere. This incident wasn't published, but Frank Caprio did mention it in his book. Eventually, the world's most narcissistic judge will gain recognition. Seeing Frank Caprio's court rulings, it is hard to imagine the deep wounds that lie hidden behind his smiling face, his kindness, and his empathy. Frank Caprio served as the chief judge of the challenging court in Providence, Rhode Island for an impressive 38 years, from 1985 to 2023. He gained fame through the reality TV show Caught in Providence. His courtroom primarily handled traffic violation cases, including issues like illegal parking, speeding, and running red lights. Yet, Frank Caprio consistently approached these cases with humor and compassion, often smiling and issuing fines to resolve matters. He would sometimes engage the children of defendants in the proceedings, fostering a cheerful environment in the courtroom. At other times, he would embrace the defendants, attempting to share their burdens and sorrows. One day, they do not do so in his court. An elderly man, aged 26 years, came in who was accused of overspeeding in a school zone. When the judge asked him why he was overspeeding, the elderly man replied, eyes became moist. He said that he was taking his 63-year-old son to the hospital because he has blood cancer. Frank Caprio took the time, without wasting any time, wished the elderly man and dismissed the case without imposing a fine. This cheerful attitude of theirs was appreciated not only in America, but all over the world. Even judges from other countries considered Frank Caprio as their ideal. However, behind this smiling face lies a painful story that brought them to this point, something they never imagined. After his retirement in 2023, he was diagnosed with cancer, and during this time, he began writing his book, Compassion in the Court, which was published in 2025. An intriguing story lies behind Frank Caprio's demeanor, which involves an incident with his grandparents. When they migrated from Italy to Providence City, his grandparents were entirely uneducated. Their situation was so terrible that grandfather sold fruits to support the family. One day, he was caught by the police while drinking and making noise with friends. Frank Caprio's grandmother borrowed money from neighbors and went to court, offering money to the judge to bail out her husband in front of everyone. She communicated in gestures and broken English. At that time, her little son Tap was present, who knew a bit of English. The judge called Tap over and told him to take his father home. He was released. After Tap shared this with his mother, she went home, expressing her gratitude to the judge. This little boy was none other than Judge Frank Caprio's father, who was affectionately called Tap. He and his father Tap, along with mother Mina, began to live in that cold water and a one-room house. If he ever had to take a shower, he had to go a few kilometers. Tap, his father, attempted to set up multiple stalls, but because of the Great Depression, none of his ventures were successful. In the end, he secured a job in milk distribution, and Frank Caprio started assisting him from a young age. Once, when Frank was 8 years old, he had to deliver milk to a house. This house belonged to a wealthy person whose son was Frank's schoolmate. In the early morning, with an empty cart, Frank Caprio knocked on that house's door and a delicious smell of toast started coming out. When the door opened, his school friend was sitting at the breakfast table inside. Frank thought he might be invited for breakfast, but instead he was being scolded by his dad. His dad was angry with him. While pointing at the crying child, he told Frank, "Count your blessings, you are fortunate, otherwise you would be struggling to lift milk in the snow like that boy." Young Frank Caprio was so hurt by this comment that he wrote it down exactly as it was in his book 80 years later. But one thing was clear. Frank Caprio, despite facing very tough circumstances in his childhood, was very happy with his life because he received such upbringing. The conditions were so dire that during winter nights they didn't even have a blanket to cover themselves while sleeping. The milk company provided only one blanket, and that was used for the milk. It was placed over the milk to prevent it from freezing. At night, that same blanket was shared between Frank Caprio and his brother. Since that blanket had milk cream on it, a mouse would come every night to eat the cream, and Frank Caprio was very scared.
Frank Caprio's father placed a hand on his shoulder and said that one day you will become a lawyer, but remember my words, do not charge fees from the poor. At that time, Frank was studying in high school and worked many part-time jobs to make ends meet. He worked as a milk delivery man with his father, distributed newspapers, and even set pins in a bowling alley. He also worked as a waiter in a restaurant and even polished shoes for people by the roadside to cover his expenses. Following high school, he gained admission to a college in Providence, which was a remarkable achievement for someone from a poor family. Of his 45 cousins, Frank Caprio was the second to attend college. In his final year of college, he applied to Boston University Law School, which was his dream. However, attending this university meant he would have to quit all his part-time jobs. So how will we manage? He got admission in that university, but Frank knew very well that his parents would not be able to afford the expenses of that university. Therefore, instead of enrolling in his dream university, he worked as a teacher during the day and attended another university for law classes at night. During this time, another incident occurred with Frank Caprio that he would never forget for the rest of his life. One day, on his way back from college, one of his classmates gave him a lift home. Frank lived in a club board apartment that appeared to be in terrible shape on the outside. Frank's classmate observed his living situation and told him that to become a successful lawyer, he shouldn't live in a place like this. At that moment, Frank felt very bad, but he thanked him without responding and moved on, yet he would never forget this incident for his entire life. After becoming a lawyer, he also entered politics, and once again he stood for the Attorney General's election. However, the opposing party organized false accusations of organized crime against him, leading to his downfall. Cut. Following this, he resumed his legal practice. One day, while Frank Caprio was having lunch, he suddenly received a phone call from the city's mayor. The mayor informed Frank that one of the judges from Providence's 3 municipal courts had been transferred, and now a seat was vacant.
Consequently, a position has opened up.
Frank was confused about why the mayor was informing him of this at that moment. The mayor responded by saying he believed Frank was the ideal candidate for the position, would be. Frank had never experienced a moment of joy greater than this. It was not just a proud moment for Frank, but also for both of his parents. Frank Caprio had also been a wrestling champion, and whenever he had a match, his father was always present to watch.
Frank, as a newly appointed judge, attended the court proceedings on his very first day. The first case was of a woman who had several $100s in parking tickets. Upon her arrival, she immediately started being rude to Judge Frank Caprio, declaring that she would refuse to pay the fine. She claimed that she had children to support and could not manage the fine payments. Judge Frank Caprio set her up on a payment plan so she could pay in installments. She was quite obstinate and stated that regardless of what happened, she would not pay.
On his very first day, Judge Frank Caprio was confronted with a bribe attempt, and he dismissed the case by booting her car, meaning it would not be operable until the fine was paid. Her car would not be able to move until the fine was paid.
After the court session, the clerk scolded Frank, saying how would that woman drop her kids off at school or go grocery shopping now?
On the very first day, there was a frown on the tub's forehead, and he was not happy. This day turned out to be a turning point in Frank Caprio's life. After that, he made a decision. He made a decision that if he had to pass judgment against any defendant, he would first ascertain the effects this ruling would have on their families. He claimed that Bob's harsh words imparted lessons that he did not learn in 5 years of law school. Following this, Judge Frank Caprio created a fund for donations, which he named after his mother, Philomena.
The story behind this is that the judge's brother had a great passion for shooting videos. He created videos on various topics, but was always on the lookout for a great scene to film.
One day, he got an idea. He always wanted to shoot videos like the judge's brother.
To record the proceedings of the court.
Judge Frank Caprio was very much against this idea. However, Joe somehow managed to convince him.
The show was titled Caught in Providence and was broadcast on local cable television.
Originally, the show was broadcast only on local TV, but after social media emerged, episodes were shared online, reaching a global audience. To be seen. Through this, Judge Caprio became renowned for his empathy and kindness, recognized as the nicest judge in the world, not just in Providence. Having held this position for 38 years, Judge Caprio resigned in January 2023, and a few months later, he shared his cancer battle with the world. He disclosed that he was battling a cancer-like illness. He went to the hospital on August 20th, 2025.
In the video, he was seen asking his fans for their prayers. The very next day, on August 21st, 2025,
He has left this world for good, never to return again.
he left behind courtroom memories that remind us of compassion.
We gain insights on overcoming challenges with kindness, compassion, and fairness.